who takes down all the stars in Los Angeles to win the United States Open.
How about that? Wyndham Clark getting his very first major championship win yesterday in the U.S. Open. Welcome in, everybody. It's a Monday on Sports Daily right here on KFH. Tommy Castor and Paul Savage in for Jacob Albracht on this Monday. Jad Chambers producing the show as always. Your phone calls on the IHOP hotline. It's open now, 869-1240 if you'd like to join the program. A lot to get to on the program today. Going to talk golf, both the U.S. Open and the Wichita Open, a big-time blockbuster NBA trade. We'll give you the latest on the Bob Huggins situation at West Virginia and a whole lot more. Paul, how was your weekend? Glad to see you today.
Well, it was a busy weekend. Watched a good amount of the Open, at least as far as I could. Had some performances going on with Shakespeare in the Park. Much ado about nothing. And that kind of, and being the fact that it's in LA, everything's delayed. I mean, you're watching Open golf and till 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. And so I didn't get to see as much as I wanted, but I watched the whole day on Thursday. I watched the whole friggin' day and just had some observations about the course. It was, It looked like a course that was going to be very easy to score on, and it was the first day. Greens were so soft that you and I could have probably played under 100 and been successful. But anyway, it was really fun to watch, and of course to see Rory out there and to see some of the guys that you're not familiar with, and then Wyndham Clark to end up winning it. Quite a story indeed.
Well, why don't we go ahead and jump right into the U.S. Open because that, obviously was the big sporting event over the weekend on this Father's Day weekend. Wyndham Clark winning the U.S. Open, his first major championship. Kind of remarkable, Paul. I believe Wyndham Clark was the fourth golfer ever to win a major championship after missing the cut the first two times he had played that tournament. So Wyndham Clark played the U.S. Open in 2021 and 2022, missed the cut in both of those years, and then comes back on his third try and wins the U.S. Open at LA Country Club. I think that, but let's start there. Let's talk about the winner himself before we get into some of the other storylines with Rory McIlroy and Ricky Fowler and others. So Wyndham Clark, I think that, it was pretty impressive the way that he was able to sort of hang tight in that back nine on Sunday. There were some opportunities for him to drop a few shots and for the guys right behind him, like Rory, to come back up and challenge him. In fact, there were a couple of bogeys in that back nine, but Clark hung tough. And honestly, Paul, I think that's what I love about the U.S. Open in general. And we could talk about, the Thursday round. We can talk about, how the course was set up fairly easy on that opening day. But credit to the USGA because they made it a little bit more difficult as the weekend came in. We didn't see really any golfer going extremely low. Wyndham Clark was the only one to finish double-digit under par at 10 under par to win the tournament. But, there were some stretches there in the back nine, and that's what a U.S. Open is all about, where you can be resilient. You can, it's a battle of attrition. I called it on Thursday because there are opportunities in any U.S. Open venue to trip up and to let other players back into it. Credit to Wyndham Clark for hanging tight and winning the entire tournament.
Right. And amazingly enough, it's hard to believe that Wyndham Clark was the 293rd ranked player in the official golf rankings a year ago. 293rd, which just goes to show you what we've always talked about on this show, that as we have discussed athleticism and in particular sports, golf may be, Tommy, and you can agree with this or not, there's no right or wrong answer, but golf may be the greatest fine line between being a PGA championship winner or being, 100th on the win list. I mean, it's a fine line in the world of golf, and it's amazing how these things work for some guys. 293rd last year, a year ago, and now he's champion of the U.S. Open. It just, and life-changing, by the way. The pool of money on that particular tournament was $3.6 million, if my memory serves right. And
it's a big purse.
That's life-altering for a guy like Wyndham Clark, and so it's really cool to see. That's what this tournament is all about.
He's got a fun story, or not really a fun story, but an intriguing story, backstory with his life, from Denver. So I'm sure that you got behind him, Paul, because he's from Colorado, and I know how big of a fan you are of that state. So he's from Denver, I believe he went to college at Oregon, I believe. I think he was an Oregon Duck.
Quack.
And then, has played on the PGA Tour for a few years now, again, breaking through for his first major championship. And it was really, I think, inspiring to watch his story with his mother, who passed away from breast cancer when he was in college, and, dedicating that victory to her. The one thing I like about Wyndham Clark, and you mentioned that fine line, Paul, in the world of golf between being a winner and not being a winner. I think some of that has to do with the way that you carry yourself, the confidence that you have in your game. I mean, there's so much mental that goes into being a champion in the game of golf. And Wyndham Clark, I think that's what propelled him over the edge. That, like I mentioned before, there were multiple opportunities for him to fall apart and for the wheels to come off.
Right.
And I think it was that mental fortitude for him to be able to hang on, and win that tournament. And that's what we see time in and time out with players. Look at Brooks Koepka, who I think that when he's won major championships, he's had not only the physical attributes, but the mental fortitude to get it done. That leads me into the next topic when it comes to the U.S. Open. Ricky Fowler, Paul, was tied for the lead after 54 holes. And it had been a long time since we had seen Ricky Fowler even in contention for a major championship. The guy completely rebuilt his golf game. I wonder, though, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, will we ever see Ricky Fowler win a major?
Well, you might see him win the PGA coming up. I mean, that's kind of a question that, nobody knows, because we just talked about the fine line of golf. Sure, he could win the very next major that they play, or he may never win another one the rest of his life. That might be better odds if you want to, if we want to
Right.
call one of the betting outfits that we deal with and make a bet. But with that being said, it's always hard to say. It's such a big part of the mental game. And I appreciate you talking about the mental aspect of this particular U.S. Open. Butch Harmon, as you know, is probably considered, I think, maybe the finest golfing coach to ever, coach some of the big names in the world of golf. Butch Harmon, 75% of his coaching isn't your swing, your grip, your stance, your backswing, your downswing, your head location. You know what he's about? Mental toughness, concentration. Those are the things that win in golf. And, if Butch Harmon says it, I believe it. So I like that point that you have. And Ricky Fowler is one of those that appears to me to have what it takes physically. The question is, what about that mental thing? What about, because he had a couple of holes that really hurt him. And that's the nature of U.S. Open golf, though, Tommy. That's what happens at a U.S. Open. And of course, God made this golf course tougher with a little bit of dryness. And the greens became quicker. Greens became faster. It became harder to score. And when that happened, I think it almost became an advantage to the leaders on the board, because once the greens get harder and faster and hard to put a ball by the pin, and what would normally be a 2-putt ends up being a 3-putt because of the greens. It's that's the way that's the way U.S. Opens work. But it certainly wasn't Thursday, was it? With conditions of the golf course.
Sure. And going back to Ricky Fowler, and I think you can put Rory McIlroy in this category a little bit too. At least with Rory, he's won a few majors, but it's been a long time. He hasn't won a major in nearly 10 years, in nearly a decade. And this was a guy that, was heir apparent to the throne for Tiger Woods when he first burst onto the scene, and he won all those majors right away. There's been a dry spell, and Rory was one shot away from a playoff. He was one putt away on 18 for forcing a playoff with Wyndham Clark. And then, who knows what would have happened, but I think would have liked Rory's experience in a playoff situation had he been able to get to that point. I think that Rory can get back and win another major. He's young enough. He burst on the scene at such a young age that I think everybody sees him as this elder statesman now. I think he's got time, to be able to win another major championship, or maybe even a couple major championships. I'm not so sure about Ricky. I would argue that Ricky Fowler is probably the best golfer, or at least the most recognizable golfer, to never win a major championship. He's got the popularity, he's got the fan base. Everybody knows Ricky Fowler. Even the most casual PGA golf fans know who Ricky Fowler is. He's on TV doing commercials and all that stuff, but he's never won a major. He's won the Players Championship, but he's never won a major. And as much as I was behind him, I want to see Ricky win a major. I want to see those players get that monkey off of their back. It's happened before. Sergio Garcia did it. Dustin Johnson did it. They had all gotten the criticisms that they had never won a major, and I wanted to see them all get theirs. Ricky's the same way. Even though he was tied for the lead after 3 rounds with Wyndham Clark, there was something in me that I just thought he's not going to be able to hang on. I don't think he has it, at least right now, to be able to break through and win a major championship. And so I wonder, and it would really honestly at this point, Paul, surprise me if we see Ricky Fowler win a major.
Well, something, you're onto something there, because, I didn't really realize what I was thinking, but I was thinking to myself, well, this is Ricky Fowler over Wyndham Clark. I mean,
right.
Subconsciously, I think. I was actually thinking, well, Ricky Fowler. This is Ricky Fowler, for God's sakes, and he's going to overcome whatever the problems are. Isn't that funny how our minds work? And part of that is, you are correct. Ricky Fowler over the last few years has been one of the faces, not the face, but one of the faces of professional golf, and in a good thing too. But I'm kind of with you on that, and I'm trying to figure out to myself what went wrong. Well, not making shots was what didn't go. Not being able to putt, that's what went wrong.
Yeah, you had a couple of blow-up holes. You've got to be able to manage that. In fact, when we had Sam Stevens on the show, you and I, a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned minimizing those errors in a U.S. Open. Bogeys are sometimes okay on a track like LA Country Club, but double bogeys are not. And so that's ultimately what led to the unraveling of Ricky Fowler. Real quick, I looked ahead, Paul. The next major championship is the Open, which is always fun. Link style golf, typically in England. The favorite to win, Rory McIlroy, as of right now, the betting favorite, 7.5 to 1 odds to win the Open Championship. John Rahm right behind him, 9 to 1. Scotty Scheffler, 10 to 1. Brooks Koepka, 14 to 1. You have to go all the way down, and I know it's super difficult to defend a championship. Wyndham Clark, the defending U.S. Open Championship, to go back to back, is 35 to 1 odds to make it 2 in a row and win the Open Championship coming up in July. A couple more minutes, Paul, in this segment before we take a break. Let's shift gears very quickly, stay on golf, but talk about the Wichita Open. Ricky Castillo is the champion of the Wichita Open out at Crestview Country Club over the weekend, won in a playoff. This is a kid, Paul, that was in and was an NCAA champion, played at Florida, just burst onto the scene, just turned professional, comes in, wins the Wichita Open out at Crestview in a playoff. I would imagine that kind of ascent for a guy like Ricky Castillo, from going from an NCAA championship to all of a sudden winning on the Korn Ferry Tour, wouldn't shock me one bit to see this guy on the PGA Tour very soon.
Well, he certainly played well. There's no question about that. 19 under, of course, a 3-way tie, and then this was a playoff we were talking about, and winning a playoff. So yeah, you're right. We have seen these guys where we've never heard from them again, and then we've also seen some of these guys where you start to see them all the time on the tour. So it's hard to say. A young kid, a kid who is just out of college. But what an experience to come in and win your very, very first professional tournament that you enter. This isn't like it's his first PGA, or it's his first pro tournament, period, at any level. So that's almost fairy tale stuff. So yeah, that is a great story, and congratulations to this young man. A week ago, or 2 weeks ago, he was playing for his university. So that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it's a really, really quick jump for this guy. And he had rounds of 67, 62, 66, and 66 for 19 under par. I think that's about that's about on par, I would say, for the way that Crestview plays typically during the Wichita Open. But it was that second round 62 for Ricky Castillo that really propelled him into victory. Of course, got into that playoff with two other players, won the playoff. It only took one hole for him to win that playoff with a short par putt to win the tournament. Congratulations to Ricky Castillo, and also congratulations to the Wichita Open staff for putting on a stellar tournament. Tournament director Dusty Buell in his first year did a great job. I was out there on Friday afternoon on the 18th green. Just a lot of fun, and it certainly is the premier, one of the most premier events in Wichita. And so right. I don't know how often, Paul, you've had a chance to get out there and enjoy the Wichita Open over the years, but it's one of my favorite events of the entire year.
Right, and I've gone out there many times and chased autographs too, by the way. And yeah. I just want to point out, Jad and I were talking before we went on the air. Does the Wichita Open have the coolest trophy that I've ever seen in any sport?
Oh, the propeller?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, is that not the coolest thing you've ever seen? I mean, yep. How about putting that up on the mantle fireplace? Come on now, I think that's terrific.
Yeah, no, it's so good. The fact that it embodies what this city is known for, the aircraft industry, all of that stuff. Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of that. And what I love about the Wichita Open so much is not only the fact of the way that people in this city support it and come out and enjoy it and have a great time. Even the non-golf fans get out and enjoy it for the weekend. But I also love how much the players love playing in the Wichita Open. And we hear it year in and year out from players on the Korn Ferry Tour saying that it's their favorite tournament of the year. They love coming to Wichita. They love playing Crestview. They love seeing the support from the fans. They love getting on to, number 17 and having the fans cheer them and all of that. So it's certainly, in my opinion, the crown jewel, or one of the crown jewels of the Korn Ferry Tour. So once again, congratulations to Ricky Castillo winning the Wichita Open for the year 2023. I think that takes care of all of our golf talk as we get going here on a Monday on Sports Daily. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's not the most fun topic to talk about, but it did happen over the weekend. We do want to address it, do want to talk about the situation with Bob Huggins at West Virginia. We're going to do that on the other side. It's Tommy Castor and Paul Savage on a Monday. It's Sports Daily right here on KFH. Welcome back, everybody. It's a Monday on Sports Daily right here on KFH. Tommy Castor and Paul Savage in for Jacob Albracht today. Let's go right now to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Got Mike on the line. He's got a question about Patrick Mahomes. Good morning, Mike. What's on your mind?
Hey, guys. Hey, it's cool to be on the air. What chances do you guys think that some what's that?
I said for sure. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I love your show, guys. Hey,
Thanks.
what chances do you guys think that someday Patrick Mahomes will have as many Super Bowl rings as Tom Brady currently has? What do you guys think?
That's a good question. I mean, I obviously, Mike, we're looking at, he's got 2 Super Bowl rings right now. He is, in his mid to late 20s. I think it's going to depend upon how long he plays. Certainly on that path right now. But that's a pretty tall task to ask for, right? Brady's got several more than Mahomes does right now. So it's going to be a process. There is, quite a bit of work, I think, that needs to be done with the team around him. Of course, Chris Jones, that's the big topic right now, Paul, when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and the fact that there's not a deal done yet for Chris Jones and, conversations about that with Brett Veach and what that looks like. But I think that, of course, we all know that it's more than just the quarterback. Even though Mahomes is incredible and amazing, you got to have some of those other foundational pieces. So, Paul, I don't know how much you followed, and Mike, thanks for the call and thanks for the question. I don't know how much you followed, Paul, this story with Chris Jones and, whether or not a deal is going to get done with him anytime soon. But he has not reported to minicamp yet. Does that concern you at all?
Well, that's a great question, but let's not overlook Mike's question. That's a fascinating question. Will Patrick Mahomes have as many rings as Tom Brady? And to answer Mike's question before we go on to sure. Signees and guys that to Chris Jones, for instance, and guys that need to be signed. Before we go on to that, at first blood check, are you kidding? The chances of that happening are slim to none. And yet I think to myself, well, hold on. If this guy stays healthy, if he doesn't have any health problems or catastrophic type injuries, I mean, what I'm talking about is knee injuries and shoulder injuries and those kind of things. And if he has none of those, and the Chiefs continue, and it looks like they want to continue to keep great players around Patrick Mahomes, and the fact that player after player after player, particularly receivers, want to play with Mahomes, yes, I'm going out on a limb yes, Patrick Mahomes will have more Super Bowl rings than Tom Brady.
All right. Well, fair enough. Mike, again, thanks for the question. Thanks for the call. Appreciate you calling in and asking that. But I'd love to know your thoughts, though, Paul. Does it concern you, though, that Chris Jones is not reported to minicamp?
No, because that's the game that's played. How many times do we see this? I get it. I understand. How do you show you're serious about wanting a new contract? Well, don't show up to minicamp. You think that will affect Chris Jones on his ability? Are they going to teach him any new technique that's going to change his game at minicamp? Or what are they going to do at minicamp with Chris Jones that he doesn't already know? That he not only knows inside, but instinctually knows, because he is an instinctual player. And those are hard to find. Those guys that, they see a situation, they see an opening that's not there, and yet they know it's going to be there. Those are the kind of guys that are hard to find. They'll make this work. You think the Kansas City Chiefs want to go into the next season defending a Super Bowl, not with Chris Allen on Chris Jones on the defensive line? Of course not.
You wouldn't think so.
Chris Jones is, and by the way, who over the course of the last couple of seasons had said he might be the MVP? Oh, sure, you got Mahomes. But you know how important it is to get push in the middle, on the middle of an offensive line? When you can get push and you take away the comfort area, the step-up area for a quarterback in the NFL to step up and avoid rim runners and step up into that pocket, Tommy, how important is it a guy to take that little step-up area away? Chris Jones is one of only a handful of interior defensive linemen that can do that. They will get him. They will sign him. He's going to be looking at about $30 million a year is my guess. He may become the highest paid defensive lineman in the league. Won't surprise me, even going past Aaron Donald. Won't surprise me. But yes, they're going to pay for him because he is so important. Other than Patrick Mahomes, if you said what's the second most important ingredient in this team, I would say Chris Jones.
Yeah, I mean, he's a foundational player along with Mahomes and probably Travis Kelce.
Right.
I'm not concerned yet. I will be concerned if training camp gets underway and there still is not a deal done, just because of the nature of these things. And I don't want distractions, as you get into training camp and then into preseason and all of that. So I'm not concerned yet. I still overwhelmingly believe that something will happen and something will get done with Kansas City. There is just that tiny little shred of doubt in my mind that, I guess we'll have to wait and see. And there, I think, is a slim chance at this point that a deal doesn't get done, but we'll cross that bridge when we actually get to it. Let's shift gears here, Paul, and talk a little college basketball. Definitely not a fun conversation to have, not something that we revel in or enjoy talking about necessarily, but Bob Huggins, the legendary coach for West Virginia, spent a year at Kansas State, was at Cincinnati for a while, resigned over the weekend after getting pulled over and arrested for DUI in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania over the weekend. It's the second controversy in less than 2 months for Bob Huggins. Went on a radio show like 6 weeks ago and used offensive and homophobic language on the radio interview. We talked about it on this program. We talked about, the offensive language that Huggins used. He was given a punishment by the university, kind of a zero tolerance situation, suspended for a couple of games, had to pay a fine, and then was pulled over for DUI. I don't know, Paul, if you've had a chance to read the arrest report from Bob Huggins from that situation. He blew almost 3 times the legal limit on the breathalyzer, didn't know where he was, didn't know how he got there, had a shredded tire. I mean, this could have really easily turned into a tragedy, a clearly avoidable tragedy. And so less than 24 hours after that arrest happened, Huggins released a statement along with officials at West Virginia announcing his intent to resign and retire as head coach of the Mountaineers. Like I said, it's nothing to revel in. But I think my question now, Paul, on this Monday morning, about 48 hours removed from when this all happened, is how will everyone remember Bob Huggins? What is the legacy of Bob Huggins? Is it what he did on the court and how good of a coach he was and that fun personality and, kind of that gruff exterior, but, was always fun to watch? Or will it be, unfortunately, these controversies that ended up derailing his career?
Well, there's going to be two ways he's looked at. One way is going to be in the state of West Virginia, and the other is going to be in the rest of the country or in basketball world. I'll put it that way, maybe throughout the world. Because he is a Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer and everybody knows who he is. Even in China, they know who, the Basketball Hall of Famers are. So with that being said, in the state of Washington, he's going to be forgiven. He is a West Virginia born and raised individual, graduate of West Virginia. There's going to be a forgiveness for him, I predict. Now, not next week. I don't mean next week, but I'm talking about in the future. Time will heal this for the citizens and the university at West Virginia. No, it's not going to be pleasant and it's not going to be easy to get through, but it will heal for those in West Virginia. However,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, however, for the rest of the country, it's tough to take, partly because of 1 month ago. Do you remember one of the elements of his punishment was they're taking $1 million off his contract a year, $1 million a year less. And he agreed to that. I don't need that extra $1 million. And that's what the penalty was for the comments on the radio. So with that being said, I think that, Tommy, we're going to have a two-pronged forgiveness situation. But I don't know, two instances this close together makes it hard to forgive. And I, one, will forgive. I probably won't forget, but I've always been about forgiving, and because that makes your life better. That's just a little something, a little nugget. Nobody needs to listen to Coach Savage. What's he know? But I think it would be better to forgive him, but you don't necessarily need to forget. But there will be an element in certain circles that will forgive him over time, not next week, not next month, maybe not next year, but over time, Tommy.
I think for me, more than anything else, I want to see Bob Huggins get the help that he needs, that he clearly needs. This is not the first drunk driving arrest that Bob Huggins has had. He had one that forced him out of his job at Cincinnati, where he had been wildly successful. He had led the Bearcats to, I think, 11 straight NCAA appearances in the tournament, and then was arrested for drunk driving. I believe in 2005 was the year that happened. Ultimately resigned a year later. And that was due large in part to that situation. Got a second chance and went to K-State. And I'll tell you what, Paul, that was a fun year. I know it was only 1 year that Bob Huggins was in Manhattan, but man, it was a fun year. You had Michael Beasley, who, turned into a superstar. That was incredibly fun to watch. He revived a Kansas State basketball program, even though he was only there for 1 year. Then he left to go back to his alma mater at West Virginia. I don't think anybody could have blamed him for doing that, for leaving K-State after 1 year to go back to West Virginia. And then you had a pretty successful tenure with Frank Martin as the head coach at Kansas State. So I've always enjoyed following Bob Huggins from the year that he was at Kansas State to the time that he was at West Virginia playing in the Big 12. Watching him, he was one of and is one of the great characters in college basketball. But from a human perspective, these two controversies, 6 weeks apart from each other, were both self-inflicted mistakes. There's nobody that can be blamed for this other than Bob Huggins.
Well, that's
for either situation, right?
Right.
There's nobody else that you can point at and say, oh yeah, like that person has some responsibility. No. It's Bob Huggins. Bob Huggins chose to litter his floorboard of his SUV with beer cans.
Right.
And drive and blow over double the legal limit, and not know where he was.
Right.
And not be able to tell officers where he was going.
Well,
he's the only one to blame for that. So I think more than anything else, from a human perspective, I like Bob Huggins a lot, and I want to see him get the help that he needs.
Well, a quick question for you, Tommy, if you don't mind, and no right or wrong answer once again, but, Bob Huggins is in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. as are, Bill Self, and there's been lots of guys that are in the Hall of Fame right now as we speak, who are still actively coaching. And there are those who say that, like players, maybe coaches should have to retire, be done with basketball before they're placed in the Hall of Fame. And of course, the reason that they do it the way they do it, at least one of the reasons, is that some of these coaches are going to coach into their 70s and 80s. Give them a chance to be in the Hall of Fame. Let them enjoy the fame that goes along with the Hall of Fame. And that's why a guy like a Bob Huggins has already been inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. So I guess my question is sort of two-pronged, if you don't mind. One, does this tarnish the reputation of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame? And secondly, Tommy, should the Basketball Hall of Fame say, we're done inducting active coaches? Because this isn't the first time that a coach has had a run-in with the law or got into trouble with regards to cheating with the NCAA back when there was an NCAA that had teeth. It's not the first time that something bad has happened with a guy that's already been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Tommy, should they stop inducting active coaches, and should they make a point of making sure that, or maybe even a third question might be, should they, when these kind of things happen, have a device to expel them from the Hall of Fame? I just thought of that. I'm not sure I like that, but
that's really
an
tough.
interesting question, isn't it?
It's really tough. I think that, had the situation, and thank God it didn't, but had the situation ended tragically.
Oh my God. I hadn't thought of that.
At that point, all bets are off.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I hadn't thought of that.
And thank goodness it didn't. That didn't happen.
Right.
But I think that you could have some kind of mechanism to do that. I'm not sure it's appropriate in this particular case, because thank God they avoided disaster. Bob Huggins avoided disaster when he made that decision to get behind the wheel. As far as human life is concerned, I don't think it tarnishes the legacy of the Naismith Hall of Fame, because the Hall of Fame didn't do anything. Bob Huggins did. So I don't think it tarnishes the legacy of the Hall of Fame. But I do get your point as far as saying maybe you wait until coaches are retired to induct them. I don't know. I think each case is different. It is great to see active coaches be able to, be recognized while they are at their peak and in their prime and doing, amazing things. So I get that. I get that point. I'm undecided on that, but I do think that it would be fair in kind of an egregious situation to have a mechanism to maybe expel an inductee. I don't know. I guess I'll pose it back to you, because you've got such a history with Hall of Fames around the state of Kansas and locally. Is there a mechanism in any of the Hall of Fames that you're a part of to remove somebody from the Hall of Fame if something happens?
No, not in any of the Hall of Fames that I'm dealing with. No, that's a good question for us locally. There is not. There is no wording with regards to that in any of the bylaws that I deal with.
Interesting. Well, it certainly brings up that question, not only with the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, but just Hall of Fames in general. And I know that we don't take any sort of pleasure in this. There's no joking around about it. I've always liked Bob Huggins, and I'm sad to see him go. And I do hope he gets the help that he needs. But, certainly a disappointing end to the Bob Huggins era in Morgantown with West Virginia. We're going to take another break. When we come back on the other side, we'll do a giveaway. So get ready for that. That's coming up next right here on Sports Daily.
think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. It's a Monday right here on Sports Daily. Tommy Castor, Paul Savage, Jad Chambers producing the show. Hope all the dads out there, by the way, had a great Father's Day. I was really fortunate enough, Paul. I love playing golf, and was fortunate enough to be able to play Prairie Dunes up in Hutchinson yesterday for Father's Day with some friends of mine, and that's such a great course. It's so much fun to play. So I got to do that in the morning, and then we had a Father's Day steak dinner last night, which was awesome. So definitely a Father's Day, and knowing, now that I've got a toddler and a newborn, getting a chance to just sort of get out and play some golf with some buddies and then have a steak dinner. I couldn't have picked a better Father's Day than that.
Well, that's just terrific. And by the way, Prairie Dunes is a great golf course. If you've never tried it, go give it a shot. I played it once in my younger days when I was trying to play golf. Played it once, hit a ball over into some rough, went over and started trying to find it. And there were a number of yuccas. There's yuccas all over the place, as you know, out there. And I heard this. I didn't see it, but I knew what it was. And I'm not messing with rattlesnakes. That rattlesnake got that ball, I can tell you that. And I got out. I got out of that real quick. Never saw it, but I know a rattlesnake when I hear a rattlesnake. So there you go.
It's a very difficult and challenging golf course.
Not easy. That's
and
right.
I'll tell you, I'll be, straight up. I'm not an amazing golfer. I'm okay. And Prairie Dunes is one of those courses that it makes even like solid golfers humble very quickly. One of the guys in my group, a good friend of mine, played college golf. The guy hits it a mile, can smash his driver. He compresses the golf ball, takes the divots, has the backspin on the wedge shots. And I think he shot in the mid 80s yesterday at Prairie Dunes, because it's a tough golf course. And so, but definitely scenic, and it's held its fair share of, you want to talk about major championships, which we did at the very beginning of the show. The U.S. Senior Open has been held out there. I know that there have been, I think the ladies U.S. Open was out there one year. A very historic and beautiful golf course out there in Hutch. So I was fortunate enough to be able to play that golf course yesterday. The weather was great too. I mean, we couldn't have had a more perfect Sunday in June for Father's Day in general, for all the dads out there, for the final round of the Wichita Open. I mean, it was an absolutely gorgeous day in this part of the country. And so I think it was awesome. And hopefully all the dads out there had a great Father's Day.
Yeah.
How was Shakespeare, by the way?
Yeah. My son for Father's Day says, Dad, I'm going to go to the Sunday night performance in Andover for your Much to Do About Nothing. So my son rode out there with me and sat around during theater call for that hour, and then stayed and watched the whole play. We had a great time. What a great Father's Day. What a great gift for me to have my son in the audience. It was a lot of fun. And by the way, Tommy, 3 more chances to see Shakespeare in the Park, Much to Do About Nothing. That'll be next week on that'll be next Friday at which one is it? It's at College Hill, and then Saturday at downtown at what's the name of the park down Riverside, and then it'll be the last one will be at Friends Church over on the west side. So there you go. There the 3 more chances to see Shakespeare in the Park, Much to Do About Nothing, which is
very cool.
Sort of the theme of this show on occasion.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I'll understand that. I know you mentioned that your performance on Sunday was in Andover at the Capitol Federal Amphitheater.
Beautiful. I'd never seen it before.
I love that
venue.
Gosh. It's so great. And speaking of the Capitol Federal Amphitheater, Odyssey and KUIN bring you Concerts in the Park, sponsored by IHOP. Free live music Fridays from 8 to 10 p.m. in Andover Central Park at the Capitol Federal Amphitheater. The address of that, by the way, is 1607 East Central Avenue in Andover this Friday night. Across the Pond will be playing. You can bring your lawn chairs, blankets, and extra cash for the food trucks. No coolers are allowed. The gates open at 6:30 p.m. If you're looking for a fun, free event for the family, there's a playground right there for the kids. There's the amphitheater right there. Friday night across the pond, concerts in the park, sponsored by IHOP, sponsored by Odyssey, and our sister station, KEYN. Before we take another break and get into hour number 2, let's do a giveaway, Paul.
Yeah.
The Wichita Wind Surge finally back in Wichita. They've been on the road for the last couple of weeks. They're back in town this week. We've got a pair of vouchers for tickets to see any Wind Surge game, a home game of your choice. We'll do that right now. We'll take caller number 1 on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. If you want to go see the Wind Surge for any home game this season, the caller 1 right now, Jad will take your call at 869-1240. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we'll kick off hour number 2 with some NBA talk. It's on the way for you next on Sports Daily.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour number 2 of Sports Daily on a Monday underway. Tommy Castor, Paul Savage, Jad Chambers producing the show. Jacob Albracht out today. The IHOP hotline is open at 869-1240. Would love to get your calls as the hour rolls on. Also, thanks to everybody watching our video stream right now on the KFH YouTube page, the KFH Facebook page, and the Sports Daily Twitter page. You can leave your comments on any of those platforms. Your comments will pop right up on the screen. So we really appreciate you viewing the show as well today. Paul, we're going to get into some NBA talk here in hour number 2 a little bit later on this hour. We will discuss the NBA draft coming up later on this week and what we think might happen with Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson from KU, and maybe even some other players that we know here locally. We'll talk about all of that a little bit later on this hour, but kicking off hour number 2, a big-time blockbuster NBA trade is being finalized as we speak that will send Bradley Beal, all-star guard, 3-time all-star guard Bradley Beal, to the Phoenix Suns from the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are expected to get back Chris Paul, former Shocker Landry Shamet, several draft picks, and a pick swap as well. That is all according to Adrian Wojnarowski yesterday. So we want to talk about this trade a little bit here, Paul. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to come together. Assuming it is finalized, we're looking at potentially a brand new big 3 in Phoenix with Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. In your mind, does this trade and sending Beal to Phoenix, does it vault the Suns up to the very top of the Western Conference?
Well, I'm probably going to go against a common theory, and that is I'm not sure, Tommy. I'm just not sure that this is that deal that will take Phoenix to where they want to be. Now, obviously, Chris Paul is going to be traded, and he's going to be gone, and that's a good move. That's the Suns need to do that. But no, I'm not totally 100% bought in that Bradley Beal will be the guy that will make a difference with the Suns. And part of the reason, if I can point it out, part of the reason that I believe that is that, he is sometimes injured. He hasn't done a great job of getting the Wizards to where they need to be, into the playoffs or up the list and moving on deeper into the playoffs. He's not been that guy. And so with that being said, maybe a change of scenery, playing with a Durant would certainly help, playing with some other quality players. And I mean, particularly when you look at Devin Booker, that's one of those it guys. And between Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, averaging last year almost 75 points between the three, it sounds like a good trade. I'm not convinced that it is.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I think that the one thing that is important to keep in mind in all of this is that the Suns are very top heavy, especially with this trade, assuming it goes through. You're losing, Chris Paul, he is what he is. He's like 49 years old or whatever. Like, he's not an impact player like he used to be. You're losing him. You're losing Landry Shamet, who I think, throughout the course of the season, the Suns were able to get good production out of him at times. You're losing the opportunity to, I think, have a bounty of draft picks by completing this trade. But what you're getting in return is a known quantity in Bradley Beal. You're getting a 3-time All-Star to come in and play with Devin Booker, who we know is one of the best players in the NBA, and Kevin Durant, who has been a cornerstone in the league for a long time. My only hesitation on this, I think I'm more bought into it than you are, but my only pause in this, my only hesitation in this is that we've seen teams attempt to build a big 3 around Kevin Durant for a while now, and it hasn't worked as of late. It didn't work in Brooklyn. The first iteration of what has happened in Phoenix, I know it's a small sample size. It didn't particularly work all that well. Maybe this will be the formula for success for Phoenix, and to have Kevin Durant, be able to duplicate the success that he had when he was in Golden State, and the big three, with him and Steph and Draymond, there at Golden State. It's been a while though since we've seen that formula be successful for teams that have Kevin Durant on the roster. Maybe this one will finally be the right one. I think it will be. I genuinely do. But that's the only thing that gives me a slight amount of pause.
Well, I certainly like your take with regards to, the big three. You throw three really good players together. That's no guarantee, is it, Tommy, that a team will be a dynasty, or a team will go deep into the playoffs, or that a team will win an NBA title. Slapping three guys together, if that was the case, we would have seen the Lakers and other teams do the same thing. So there's no guarantees. And it just seems to me that, this is one of those situations where I'm just not sure. I'm not convinced that Beal is that guy, that glue to a big threesome. Is he good? Of course he's good. He's averaged at points, 30-some points per game per season for 2 or 3 years, a number of years ago. Can he play? Yes, he can play. Number 3 overall draft pick in 2012. He has experience. He has all the ingredients. But I just don't know that this is one of those threesome that I see working. I think Devin Booker has a chance to sort of be that glue. And maybe I'm wrong on that. But maybe Devin Booker brings these two guys together and they play well together. But I like your point also. There's been moments. I mean, we've seen Kevin Durant on some pretty good threesomes, haven't we?
We have. I mean, that's happened over the years and with several different franchises and organizations. Bradley Beal is coming off an injury-plagued season. So I think that would be another question too, is how healthy is he in joining the Suns? But he did average over 23 points a game, shot 51% from the field during the games that he was healthy in. He only played 50 games though.
That's right.
And so the Suns are taking a gamble that he's going to be healthy. This is a guy that just turned 30. So, he's not a spring chicken by any means, but he is incredibly talented. And he's been on a Wizards team throughout the course of his career that really they've never had a ton of direction. They've rarely, if ever, been in the conversation of, best teams in the East or playoff contending teams. So I think this gives him an opportunity to be able to continue on his career in the search of a title. You don't hear the name Bradley Beal a ton because he's been on historically not great teams with the Wizards. This is, I think, another storyline in this potential trade, Paul. And that is all of these teams in the Western Conference, and now Phoenix is one of them, and they were before too when they acquired Kevin Durant, doing everything that they possibly can do to go up against the NBA champion Denver Nuggets. And, it's kind of an arms race a little bit. I equate it similarly to the AFC West, right? Where the Chiefs had Patrick Mahomes and all the teams in that division go out and they load up on players. They load up on superstars. Denver goes and acquires Russell Wilson and they bring in Sean Payton. We know what the Raiders have done. The Chargers have acquired, big time players, all in an attempt to take down the Kansas City Chiefs. It's kind of the same way in the Western Conference and the NBA, where you've got Nikola Jokic and you've got that squad in Denver that just won a title. And now you've got all these other teams in the conference that are trying to stockpile talented players in an attempt to dethrone them. I don't know if any of these teams are going to be successful. I don't know if Phoenix is going to be able to take down Denver or not in the West, but they certainly now have, assuming this trade gets finalized, another weapon to be able to go after Denver. It's kind of like if you want to be the man, you have to beat the man in the Western Conference.
Right. And the question is, obviously, is Beal that guy? I'm not sure. He might be. We'll just see. Maybe he flourishes. Maybe there's magic there with his teammates. But I'll tell you what, the Phoenix Suns are spending a ton of money on players. They're up around $160 million on Booker and Durant and Beal. That's a nice chunk of change, $160+ million a year in salary. And so when you start thinking about in terms like that, it's amazing to me. I don't know. Now, it may turn out that a change of scenery for Bradley Beal, Tommy, that might be just the ingredient. That might be just the perfect thing. And this will be a wonderful situation for Phoenix. I don't know. But I do know this. How much did we ever talk on this radio show about Bradley Beal? Because I believe
not often.
For me, this may be the first time we've ever mentioned Bradley Beal on the radio, on a radio show that I've ever been on.
And he's an all-star. And he's
an all-star.
He's averaged over 22 points a game in his entire career. He's been around for 11 years in the NBA.
Right.
He's an incredibly talented player, but he's been on a team that, they've never really been able to build a contender around him. And so now he goes from, and I wonder how he'll fit into this, where, he's going to go to Phoenix and probably not be the top dog, right? You've got Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and then even DeAndre Ayton on that roster. So now you're kind of a cog in the machine in Phoenix. And does that fit Bradley Beal well? We don't know. We really haven't seen that over the course of his career. The one thing that I think that this trade, assuming that it is completed, that it does for Phoenix, I think it puts an incredible amount of pressure on the Suns to deliver a championship.
Right.
This is the Phoenix Suns pushing all of their chips in the middle of the table. They are going all in on an NBA championship right now. You've got 4 players in Durant, Booker, Ayton, and now Bradley Beal that are making a significant amount of money. We're talking max contracts with the opportunity that they've got to win an NBA championship right now.
Right.
The window, it's not a rebuild, Paul. It's not a 2 or 3 year or 4 years down the line. We're talking an NBA championship right now or bust for the Phoenix Suns. And I'm just not sure that even with those 4 players that they'll be able to take down the Nuggets.
Yeah. But I love the way you described that. Here's what I like about what you just said. This is all about the Phoenix Nuggets saying, something, we're not going into some, hope everything works out rebuilding program that will pay dividends 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. We're going to throw in all the chips and we're going to win an NBA championship next year. Next year. That's what the Phoenix, and I'll tell you what, there's something about that I like. There's something about that I really respect. You're an NBA franchise, and you're going to do everything that you can to win a championship. Tommy, I kind of like that. And you want to know something? I think at this very moment, I'm rooting for the Phoenix Suns. Not that I have a favorite player on these guys, the 3 superstars that play for Phoenix. They're good. I like them. I follow them. I know who they are. Do I have some sort of innate, desire to see them succeed? No, there's a lot of good teams and a lot of great players, but I'm really respecting Phoenix. And the way you phrased that gave me pause as to what my original thought process was. But I'll tell you what, give kudos to Phoenix, man. They're going all in. They're going to win for their fans and win for that franchise.
I wonder also another, I think, smaller yet important storyline in all of this. What's going to happen with Chris Paul?
Well, he's going.
We knew. Well, I know, and we knew that the Suns were moving away from Chris Paul even before these trade talks had happened. I believe that didn't the Suns decline his option or so, I mean, they were going to move on from him.
That's correct.
Regardless, it sounds like he's potentially going to be part of this trade deal, and it sounds like also both the Suns and the Wizards are attempting to find another trade partner where Chris Paul will go. The Wizards don't want Chris Paul. The Suns don't want Chris Paul. So it sounds like the only couple of options on the table are Chris Paul goes to a third team that enters into this trade, or he goes to the Wizards and they buy out his contract and he becomes a free agent and can go sign somewhere else.
Right. Now,
are we at the end of the Chris Paul era in the NBA, or will there be a suitor one way or another that will find a need for Chris Paul to be on their roster?
Well, Chris Paul's what, 37, 38, something like that?
Yeah.
And that's old in NBA terms. And so in life, it's pretty young, but in NBA terms, it's pretty old. And there's a lot of wear and tear in his position. And so some NBA franchise is look at this and say, we have 72 game regular season. How many games can we expect to get Chris Paul out of? Well, when you're at that age, and you're pushing 40 and you're handling the ball and you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, it's tough. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that want him because the baggage of his contract, it will be a significant contract. He's not going to play for free. His pride, I'm sure, will not allow him to take a huge cut just so he can stay in the league and go to some, rum-dum team that, is going to be a 500 team. He wants to be relevant. He has an ego. He has an image to protect, and I don't blame him. Tommy, I'm not saying that negatively, but I won't be surprised if he doesn't play next year. Won't be surprised. Now, that's probably stupid to say on my part, but it won't surprise me. There's a lot of pride in this guy, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams that don't want him for the amount of money it's going to cost him.
Yeah, let's talk about what he did last season as a member of the Suns. He played 59 games for the Phoenix Suns. He averaged almost 14 points a game and almost 9 assists. So even though he's up there in age, he's not going to be a dynamic franchise-altering player anymore.
That's right.
That's not Chris Paul. But I think he could be an asset, for a team. And actually, according to the New York Post this morning, it looks like Chris Paul could be headed back to the Clippers, where he spent 7 seasons as a member of the Los Angeles Clippers. I think that would make sense. He's familiar with that franchise, familiar with that organization. And maybe there is something there with both that franchise and Chris Paul that would say, you know what, come back to the Clippers, finish out your career with us. We'll find, we've got a role for you where you don't have to be the top dog, but you can have success in your last couple of seasons remaining in the NBA by playing for the Clippers. So we'll have to find out and see if that's a situation where the Clippers join that trade with Phoenix and the Wizards, or if that's more of a free agent signing for Chris Paul. That would be a landing spot, Paul, that I think would make some sense.
Well, it does. I mean, when you analyze it like that, wouldn't be surprised. There's a team that has a relationship. Their fans enjoyed Chris Paul while he was playing there, so it does make total sense. That's as good a reason to end up at with the Clippers as I can come up with, Tommy. That's as good a reason.
Well, we'll see if this trade ends up getting completed or not. It looks like it will be. Bradley Beal it's kind of unique with his contract. It's like a full no trade clause, not a partial one. It's a full no trade clause. And I think he can also dictate what the return for him is, which is kind of unheard of, where I think I read this right, where he can say, all right, this is what I feel like I'm worth. And so it's important for me to make sure that the team that, in this case, the Wizards, they're getting value back in return for me. So that's kind of interesting. You don't typically see that when it comes to no trade clauses, but that's what Bradley Beal has.
Right.
It looks like he's going to waive his no trade clause and approve this trade to Phoenix. And now all of a sudden, assuming it gets done, you've got Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, DeAndre Ayton, and the Suns are going all in for an NBA championship. We'll see if they can compete with the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets in the West next season. It's certainly interesting. We're going to stay on the NBA topic. On the other side of the break, the NBA draft only 3 days away. Some local players potentially going fairly early in the draft, like Grady Dick. We'll talk about Dick's prospects, Jalen Wilson, and others. The NBA draft talk coming up on the other side. It's Sports Daily on KFH. Welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily here on KFH. I'm Tommy Castor alongside Paul Savage. Jad Chambers producing the show. Hope everybody had a great weekend, a great Father's Day, and having a great start to the work week. Paul, we are just a couple of days away from the 2023 NBA draft, and it's one of those events that when you look back historically, the teams and the players that have made incredible impacts on the game and looking at like franchise altering decisions long term really starts at the draft level, really starts with the NBA draft. I mean, go all the way back to the draft that featured Michael Jordan and Sam Bowie, right? You know, and how that ended up changing the fortunes of the Chicago Bulls long term. And then you've got the Portland Trail Blazers and, you know, not really doing anything of significance. So it all starts on draft night. How locked in do you get each year for the NBA draft?
Well, not that locked in, because part of the problem for me is there's a lot of players that I'm not familiar with. I mean, the foreign players, Tommy, I don't know anything about them unless it's a kid like Victor Wembanyama. That might be the exception where you see a lot about this kid. You know who he is. You see how athletic he is. But once I get by him, I don't know a lot about what's going on in the world when it comes to draft picks. Obviously, we've kind of got our toes in the water for Brady Dick, and probably more than not, probably 50 to 60% of all the forecasters who picked the first round of the NBA draft have him going number 11 to Orlando. Don't know if that's the case. We'll find out. A lot of things happen on draft night, but that's where I'm going to say 50% of all the websites that I've checked in the last 4, 5, 6 days heading into this draft, that's where they have him. And that's my interest right now, as a Wichita kid going to get drafted. And so that's where I'm at on that. And by the way, this Victor Wembanyama is amazing. Have you seen any tape on him at all?
Yeah,
Tommy.
Yeah. I mean, the guy's a unicorn. I mean, he is a special player.
Very.
That it's one of those. Jacob and I discussed him a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
When it was when the Spurs won the draft lottery, and we were talking about, you know, he's going to go number 1 overall and what he brings to a franchise. And I don't know about you, watching his tape, it's so. I don't want to call it weird because that sounds disrespectful and negative, and it's not negative. It's just it's not graceful, at least the way that I'm watching his tape, you know, but it works. It's super effective. He's built differently than basically anybody I've ever seen before. And so I'm really, really interested to see what Greg Popovich can do to continue to develop him, what kind of players around Wembanyama the Spurs can bring in to help turn them back into a contender. But yeah, this kid is special, and he's going to, you know, barring any kind of injury or anything, he's going to be a difference maker in the NBA.
Right. And of course, the interesting thing about this kid is there's a lot of NBA teams over the past, 10, 15 years who've gotten away from the big traditional center. I mean, the days of Wilt Chamberlain setting himself in the paint and defending and playing right down around the basket and, getting the ball posted to him and those kind of things. It seems like those days have come and gone a little bit. And I remember on one of the playoff on the last series on the NBA championship series, I can remember the guys that are doing the game talking about, something. This is just the kind of guy. Jokic just might be the kind of guy that brings a traditional center back into the NBA. If you can find them, they are good to have. If you can find them, they can be beneficial to your franchise. And this is a kid who shoots the ball well from outside. He handles himself well on the inside. He can post up. He blocks a lot of shots. Of course, when you're 7'5", you're going to be up and you're going to be able to block some shots, I believe. So, but this is a kid that, the hype is there. But I think if ever I've heard hype that may not, that will come true, I think this might be the hype that does come true. And I would expect big things from this kid. And so, yes, I'd like to see see him do well. I don't think there's any question he's going to the Spurs, is there? I think that's as done a deal as you and I will ever see.
He's the number one guy. There's no doubt about that. Brandon Miller looks like from Alabama, projected at number 2 as of right now. And then when we get down the draft a little bit and when we get into the Kansas kids, Grady Dick, right? We talked about him briefly at the beginning of this segment. I think the Magic, I think that's a great landing spot for him at 11. That being said, I'm not super convinced that he's going to be available at 11 for the Orlando Magic.
Well, that might be.
And maybe he will be, but I do think that there is a scenario where there could be a team inside the top 10 that sees the potential that Grady Dick has, sees his versatility, the fact that he's able to shoot the 3 really well. And he's got that release, Paul, as a 3-point shooter that fits really, really well in the NBA. It's a quick release. He gets up high to avoid the shot being blocked, and he's deadly, deadly accurate from the perimeter. And so while the Magic certainly have a need for that kind of shooter on their franchise, there could very well be a scenario where there's another team inside the top 10 that they want to go ahead and grab Grady Dick at, 7 or 8 or something like that. So that's going to be where, my first, the first area that I look at, where will Grady Dick fall in the draft? And I think that there is that scenario where he goes inside the top 10.
Well, I happen to be, as we speak here in the studio, I'm on a website called SB Nation. And let me just read just real quick. I don't want to read much. It's going to be like half a sentence. Arguably the best shooter in the class, going to a team that badly needs shooting. How's that for a pretty quick synopsis? Because that fits everything. The best shooter in the class, or at least arguably the best shooter in the class, he will find a spot. Because we have learned in the playoffs, those are the guys that make a huge, huge difference. Ask the Heat. When they're hitting threes, they can't be beat. When they're not hitting threes, they're a mere mortal basketball team who can be beat. And so you take a guy like Grady Dick, if he can shoot as well as these NBA experts believe, you're right. He may not be at 11 to go to the Magic. He may go a lot sooner than that. We'll see. But, boy, there is a premium on guys that can shoot the 3 at this point.
So Orlando last season, they ranked 20th in the NBA in 3-point shooting, 47%. Actually, I take that back. That's from the field in general. They were 20th in the NBA, 47%. From beyond the arc, they were only 34%.
Right.
And that was 24th in the NBA. So either way you slice it, from beyond the arc or just from the field in general, not a great shooting team. Having a guy the caliber of Grady Dick that can have that quick release and can, get on fire pretty quickly, that's invaluable for a team like the Magic. And I know from, watching this kid, not only his 1 year at Kansas, but the time that he spent in Wichita playing for Sunrise, he's got NBA pedigree written all over him, the way that he shoots. The big question, I think, when he went into college at Kansas was, are the other parts of his game there? Can he defend at an NBA level? Can he do those other things that make you an NBA caliber player and be able to stay in the league for a long time? I think he can. And I think that as, during his time at Kansas, we saw the other elements of his game begin to develop. That's a credit to Bill Self and to the coaching staff at Kansas, the athletic trainers and the strength and conditioning coaches and all of that, getting him ready to go to the NBA. I'm not sure there was, there have been a handful of very, very talented one and dones that have played at Kansas under Bill Self. Grady Dick is up there as one of the best. And I think that he has found himself becoming a more complete player from being at Kansas for that one season.
I would say so. Yeah. And not only that, such a premium on being able to shoot the basketball. Not enough of these kind of guys. And we see what a difference it can make in the NBA playoffs for everybody. So he has a particular set of skills that will be needed by many, many of these teams that have a chance to draft him ahead of the Orlando Magic. And I hadn't really considered it because I saw so many people projecting number 11, Orlando Magic, and I was kind of buying in. There were 3 out of, I would say, every 4 websites that I've looked at in the last week have said that Grady Dick is going to the Magic at 11. I started buying into it, Tommy, but I think you've made a good point. He's probably going to go higher than that because there's such a premium for the particular set of skills that this young man has, and everybody needs it. Everybody's got to have it. You want to win, you got to be able to shoot from the three, because if you can do that, then you can be like the Magic and play with just about anybody.
You know, looking at a lot of different mock drafts, most of them still have Grady Dick at 11 with the Magic.
That's
so,
right.
You know, maybe, and I know I mentioned that it wouldn't surprise me if he got into the top 10. I can see maybe the Utah Jazz looking at him potentially. I mean, they have grabbed Kansas players before. Udoka Azubuike has played there, Ochai Agbaji. So the Utah Jazz, they're familiar with Jayhawks. So that could potentially be a fit. But a lot of these mock drafts have him going to the Magic at 11. Also, how about Jalen Wilson? A lot of the mock drafts I've looked at have Wilson as a second-round draft pick, but just the overall development that Wilson has had from the time he joined Kansas to the time he left Kansas. He's 23 years old. Obviously came back for a senior season last year. To get him into a position to even be an NBA caliber player is fantastic. Do you see with Jalen Wilson, assuming he's a second-round draft pick, do you see a good NBA career on tap for Wilson?
Yes, with the right team, and of course that can be said with a lot of players, with the right team that needs his particular set of skills. Yes, there's always going to be room for somebody who can D up and play defense, and yet he's still adequate enough at shooting the three. I think that maybe you can make a case for him, but it's got to be the right situation for him. Second-round picks, as we both know, there's no guaranteed you make a squad if you're a second-round pick, is there, Tommy? And
right.
when you're a second-round pick, you know, you're going into a camp and you're going to have to compete and battle and try to get that particular position on that roster with a lot of guys that are older, more mature. Now, when I say older, I mean Jalen's already 23, so he's a little older than most rookies will be, particularly the one-and-done types. But with that being said, yes, but I think it's particularly important for somebody to take him who needs what he can offer.
Yeah, I think the thing about Jalen Wilson's game, you know, he's got the length, he's got the wingspan. There were several times during the last season at Kansas where Wilson put up a ton of points. Like, I remember there was a stretch where it was kind of an auto bet. It didn't matter what the over under was for the number of points that Jalen Wilson would put up. You constantly bet the over because he was scoring at a very, very high clip. We're talking 25 to 30 plus points per game. And I think it was like a 5 or 6 game stretch that he was doing that. What was the downfall of that? KU wasn't really winning basketball games when Jalen Wilson was doing it all. Or if they were winning, they were struggling in their wins. So I think that Jalen Wilson, you know, going into the NBA, has to go to a team to be productive where they don't rely on him. You know, he's not the end all be all. He's not the one that is going to lead the team to victory because, you know, we've seen Wilson put up a ton of points, but overall the team not be able to have a ton of success. So I think that having him be in a role, you know, coming off the bench or, you know, doing something, I guess my point is I don't want to see a team have to fully rely on Jalen Wilson to be the end all be all player on their roster. And I think assuming that that's not the case, I think he'll be able to have some success in the NBA.
Well, I think it's totally possible. We'll see, but it's going to depend on the team. But you're right. He has the length. He has the I mean, after all, come on. Best conference in America, Big 12 at the college level. Player of the year, this young man. That says something about his basketball skills. And, you know, when you're the player of the year in the best conference in America, that says something. So he'll compete. He's a competitive guy. He'll be fine. I really think that whoever takes him knows what they're getting and knows how to use him, and that's going to be good for him. I think he's going to have a long career. That's what I think.
So I want to take a look real quick here at the draft odds coming up on Thursday and see if there's any good value, to be able to pick here. The first overall pick, Victor Wembanyama is minus 20,000 to go number one overall to the San Antonio Spurs. So that's not a bet that, I'd want to take. And then, of course, you've got guys like Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller and others that are below that. But we all know Wembanyama is going to be the first overall pick. You get a little bit further down, the second overall pick, the odds on favorite is Scoot Henderson at minus 150. Brandon Miller, you can get plus money on him at plus 110. Kind of seems like those are the two that are being projected right now as potentially going second overall. Of course, Scoot Henderson is the G League player that is in the NBA draft, and some places have him projected at number 2, others have him at number 3, and then Brandon Miller from Alabama is right there too. Some other players notable that are on kind of the top 20 or so in the NBA draft that we will be familiar with in this part of the country. Keontae George is being projected as a top 20 pick in the NBA. Of course, he's the Baylor player from your neck of the woods, Paul. And so there are some really talented players that we're looking at here. I would love to try to find, and this might be something that we'll want to talk to Chelsea Messenger about on Thursday before the NBA draft, is how to even go about betting the draft. Because we know who the number 1 pick is. We know it's Victor Wembanyama. So how do you find value when you're looking at betting the NBA draft? I just don't really know the answer to that.
Yep. I'm not sure I know either, but can I back up for just a second to Brandon Miller?
Sure.
This
please.
is a young man who has made questionable choices in life, as you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you take a kid like this? Because I'm not sure that I would, because I don't know as much as, and I guess I'll just throw the name Ja Morant out. I've probably said to you, even in the short period of time you and I have been doing this radio show, that I've always considered, at least when he joined the league, Ja Morant was my favorite player. I can't believe I picked such a dog for my favorite player, because he has disappointed me with regards to the firearms situation, and then coming back and doing it again. I feel bad. That I picked him.
Yeah.
Brandon Miller might be in the same boat, because he has flaunted things at Alabama. He has done things that I would not have allowed him to do if I was at Alabama after, the gun situation. Do you go with you like him as a pick? Because I don't think I do.
It's tough because not only, Nate Oates from Alabama characterized the situation with Brandon Miller as Miller being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I don't know
which
about
might
that.
very well be true.
Well, it might
very well be true. But then it wasn't that long after that he's being introduced in an Alabama game and he's doing a gun hand signal.
Bingo.
Or whatever.
That's right.
What are you doing, dude? Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, you're an idiot. Don't do that. So I do think that there could potentially be some red flags. That whatever team picks him, they're going to do their due diligence. At least they feel like they will to bring him in.
Sure they will.
But yeah, Ja Morant is definitely a cautionary tale for Brandon Miller going into the NBA. Knowing that you picked Ja Morant as kind of your guy, after the break, I want to get your take on the Ja Morant situation because the suspension came down on Friday, 25 games. Jacob and I discussed it, but I want to get your take on all of that. We'll do that on the other side. It's Sports Daily on KFH. Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH on a Monday. Getting ready to wrap up the show here in our final full segment, Paul. A couple minutes before we go to our final break. Ja Morant, you mentioned him before the break, kind of your guy, your favorite player in the NBA. The suspension came down from Adam Silver and the league on Friday, 25 games for Ja Morant, and he will be required to meet certain objectives set forth by the NBA before he'll be allowed to return. So even though it is 25 games, it could potentially be more than that if Ja Morant does not meet those expectations. I know that you're clearly and obviously disappointed in the behavior, but what was your take when you heard the 25-game suspension come down?
Wasn't enough. Wasn't enough.
Really?
Because he's done this before, and obviously he hadn't learned his lesson. If it had been me, and this is just an opinion, I would have made it an ongoing suspension. I'll let you know, John, when you're ready to go.
Wow.
No specific number of games. I'll know it when I see it, and that's how I would have done it. I wouldn't have set it at 50. I wouldn't have set it at 72. I wouldn't have said it. I says I'll let you know when I see it. And here's the thing that's so disappointing is you make a mistake. You're Ja Morant. Guys in Wichita, Kansas, on a radio show love you to death. In fact, they make the claim you're their favorite player. You're their favorite player in the NBA. High expectations. There's a lot for you to stand up to and be a man about and show everybody that you can do this. And the disappointment of seeing somebody with so many blessings in their life, so much athleticism given to them by God, if you want to put it that way, and then you blow it. And then you turn right around and do it again like you can't learn anything. It's so disappointing. At this point, I don't care that he might have been at the point of where I was really infatuated with him. I don't care, Tommy, that he was, in my opinion, the most exciting, the most talented, the most dynamic basketball player in the entire NBA. I know I'm not the only one who thought that, but I'm very, very disappointed. It's going to take a while to get that back on me. Now, part of the reason is because it was twofold for me. This gun thing just bothers the heck out of me. As a man who believes in the Second Amendment and believes that all honest and law-abiding citizens have the right to their firearms, he makes it hard on all of us to try to maintain what is in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. And it doesn't help when a guy like this flaunts firearms without knowing how to use them, without being trained how to use them, because anybody I know that has firearms, they know what they're doing and they're safe, and he's not. And he's harmed, one of the amendments of our Constitution, and he's harmed the game of basketball. And he's harmed me. I feel bad that I was so stupid that I gave him all the loving that I gave him.
I mean, look, I think that...
Am I too overboard?
Well, look, I go back to our conversation last hour about Bob Huggins. Clearly there is something going on with Ja Morant that I think requires help.
I got you.
I think requires, I don't know if it's a mental health thing. I don't know what it is. I was disappointed by his actions as well. I think everybody was. I think especially knowing that it happened a second time after an initial suspension and then an apology and an interview where he expressed, his regret from the entire thing. And then you're like, okay, cool, we can move on. It was a lapse in judgment. And then boom, here it goes. It happens again. That's kind of Bob Huggins, right? In a different way.
Right.
But it sort of is the same kind of situation. And I want to see Ja Morant get the kind of help that he needs. It's bigger than basketball. It's bigger than the NBA. Same thing with Bob Huggins. It's bigger than college basketball. It's bigger than West Virginia. Both of those guys, need to get that personal help. And, I don't know what those objectives are that Adam Silver has set for Ja Morant. I don't know if it's more mental health, counseling or, classes that he takes or really what it is. All I know with Ja Morant is that he has a tremendous amount of talent. And the more that this sort of thing happens, the more that talent is wasted.
Right.
And I want to see Ja Morant perform at the very top of his game,
right,
to the best of his ability. And with what's happened over the last couple months or so with him, we're not seeing that. We're not going to see it for a while. And I hope that he gets the help that he needs.
Yeah. And as a father, Tommy, you know exactly what the answer is. You and I both know, because we're both fathers. We know what the answer is for Ja Morant. You're hanging with the wrong kids. You're hanging with the wrong people. You do not be around people that need to be shown that you're a man by flashing a gun. You're with the wrong people, son. Lose those people and find you some new friends that have a moral compass. How's that, Tommy? How's that for the day after Father's Day for fatherly advice?
I think you're spot on there. Hopefully he gets the help he needs. A 25-game suspension for next year for Ja Morant. And I think that everybody, who has a heart should be rooting for him to find his way and get back on track, because he is an incredibly talented basketball player. We're going to take our final break of the show. We'll come back, tell you what's on the network on the way next. It's Sports Daily on KFH.
Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, thanks everybody. Hope you have a great Monday. We will see you back here tomorrow, same time on the network today. Jim Rome follows us at 11, Bob and Jeff at 2, an hour of Maggie and Perloff at 4, 30 minutes of Zach Gelb at 5, and then at 5:30 p.m. pregame coverage. The Royals on the road in Detroit. Hopefully they can start to turn things around as this road trip continues for the Royals. Paul, hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for being in today.
Had fun. Let's do it again.
Sounds good. For Jad Chambers, for Paul Savage, I'm Tommy Castor. We'll see you back here on Tuesday on Sports Daily. Have a great day.
Sports, later news, and